Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder. And in this time when we're all working from home, I still wanted to continue the podcast and bring you the voices of the people on the front lines who can help us all better understand what's happening in our industry and how to better prepare for when we come back. Today we welcome back Executive Producer, Director of Production from Juice Pharma in New York City, Michael Kaminski. Michael started in photography 30 years ago, and today, as executive producer of Juice's in-house B12 studio, Michael is responsible for the creation of all video and photography. He was one of our most popular guests, so we wanted to get his perspective on what's happening in our industry right now and how he's envisioning our future. Welcome back, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Heather. It's a real honor. I'm glad to hear that you and your family and friends are safe, but it really is an honor to be back on your program.
Thank you so much. Tell me where you are. Tell our listeners where you are working from, and help them imagine what your space looks like.
Yeah, so I'm in my apartment in Long Beach. We as an agency, we were tracking this pretty closely. I think we were amongst some of the first to execute the work from home order. So we've been home my team has been offsite for about 15 days so far. Things are going well, no doubt about that. I will say that, having been in production my whole life, and I don't mean to say this lightly, and I don't mean to say this jokingly, and I don't mean to make this sound like it's easy, but, being in production, you are used to working from home, working from the car, working from the plane, working from the subway station. So, in many ways, work from home has been part of our makeup for many years already. So for us, things are going very well.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had that conversation with another art producer literally before you and I started, and she was saying the exact same thing, and we were laughing because we've always worked from home and worked remotely. And I myself, it's a big joke in my family because my office is actually at my house. We have a little separate area for it, so I always make the joke that it's Thursday and I've really only gotten out to walk the dogs. So my life hasn't changed too much from a where I sit, where my printer is, where all my things are point of view. But the rest of our industry has adapted, I think, really well because we're so used to, doing work on the fly.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is interesting for us and my team, and we've seen both sides of the coin, is yes, we are successfully working off site. We are delivering quality content. We're not missing deadlines. But at the same time, we are cut off from our studio. And that's very anxiety producing, knowing that we can't immediately provide content for our creative teams, right? We can't make their visions come true because we've lost access to that tool.
Yeah, I think what makes it so much easier for us to be malleable right now and work remotely is the same thing that makes it just that hard is we are solution providers. We never want to say no, and we surround ourselves with the tools and the people we need so that we can be action oriented and get something done. And all of a sudden, we don't have any of those tools or any of the things we're used to having in order to solve those creative challenges, and it's really hard for everybody.
Well, I mean, we've never operated under the conditions of having an infectious disease that we couldn't control from spreading amongst our crews, our clients, our talent. It's not like you're not allowed to shoot in the supermarket before 6 a.m.
Right.
This is a whole new ball game.
Well, tell us a little bit about what the timeline looked for you. In California, we've been sheltering in place for, over a week or so now. New York's just been a few days. I know it for all of us feels like it's been a few years. And you've mentioned that you've already been working from home for a while as a company. From a production point of view, what did the timeline look like for you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, interestingly enough, we had just moved into new offices. We had moved into a bigger space, a bigger studio. So we were really well organized after the move. So, like in the middle of February, when this started to rear its ugly head, like I was out in LA shooting, and it was a pretty prevalent topic when we were out there ready. So by the time I had gotten home, we were kind of talking about how we were doing this. And like I said, because we were working remotely a lot to support our office in San Francisco, which required us to work over, multiple time zones, we had already set everybody up at home to be remote, meaning the people that do the post, the video editors, our special effects folks, our retouchers. We already had fast machines, workstations, Wacom tablets in their homes already, just based on having to have a remote workflow before this.
Wow.
So, with the exception of being able to move really big files, which is problematic for us being in pharmaceutical because of the legal restrictions about how servers can be used and how cloud services can be used. So that's actually one thing I'm looking forward to discussing with my contemporaries, as we move for this is what do you do in a remote workflow when you're restricted from using the latest, greatest tools?
Well, I have someone I can put you in touch with because I had that exact conversation with her earlier today, and she's trying to figure that out as well. She's definitely a contemporary of yours doing the same exact thing.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, that is one of the few blockades that we're running into, especially having to, everything is so video heavy these days that, moving those files around has been interesting.
As so many of our cities do have a shelter in place right now, there is this civic responsibility for groups not to gather, and photo shoots have a lot of people together. Are you hearing about photo shoots happening, or are you hearing about people talking about wanting to try and come up with solutions? Like, I feel like it changes day by day. What are you hearing being on the front lines at your agency there, and your client? What are your clients asking for?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it changes every day, right? So we just went through this period where everyone had some hope that this was going to be a very short lived infection and it was going to go away. And it was more about preparing for how to do casting after that, how to do casting and a shoot if the virus still lingered, et cetera, et cetera. Then the conversation started to move into okay, what are the other options out there, right? And I've seen some brilliant responses from the creative community. I have seen photographers and directors that are putting up their libraries for usage, that are almost creating stock libraries out of the various topics that they have, right? I'm seeing directors and photographers that are, let's say that they're sheltered in home with their families. And let's say, for argument's sake, that they happen to have four teenage kids. Well, you know what? Those folks are set up to do a lifestyle shoot without endangering anybody, and remaining in place with the people that they're with. So the solutions and the demands, not the demands, that's the wrong word. The solutions and the inquiries have changed every day. I think one of the obvious places that a lot of people are going right now is that they're going to stock, they're going to these libraries that photographers are opening up. There's going to be a huge influx of illustration. And I think following on the wave of illustration will also go hand in hand with things being animated. Animation is an off-site workflow that doesn't require a camera to create the assets. And I think you're going to see a lot of messaging and a lot of stories told through typography and animation and things that can be created without endangering a crew and perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah, I think all of those things are really important. And I remember, again, it feels like years ago, but it was only just a few weeks ago when this started happening. I needed to get together with my group and talk about how are we pivoting to handle this. I don't want to be a deer in the headlights. And the first thing, besides talking about messaging and what we're stopping and what are we putting out there, was in a weekend, we turned around a stock selection on our website. And now all of our communication is about the collections of images that currently exist from our photographers that are available for stock. We want it to be very solutions oriented. What's visually possible now? And I think people are responding to that because they're also coming out of that deer in the headlights moment and trying to figure out, okay, well, these shoot solutions aren't working. What else do I have at my fingertips?
Yeah, I think the response has been swift. I think the response has been creative. We have so many different clients, right? And so many different brands that we work on. They're all in different life cycles for the life of the products that we work on, right? So in some cases, like I said, I've just finished a tremendous, wonderful shoot, video, photography footage, and all that stuff is in the post right now. But as we plan to, we have new clients, we're going to launch new brands in the fall. Everything has been centered around how do they create the content needed to launch their product. On the other side of things, the one thing that has suffered greatly for our clients is the inability to have conventions, the inability to have learnings, the inability to have educational things. So it's interesting, it's not just the primary campaigns and the stuff that's going away, but it's all the ancillary work that's created by shooting for those concepts, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, like big pharma clients who would have a big convention coming up that they want to be a part of and create content for, those things aren't even happening anymore.
Because the events themselves have either been postponed or outright canceled.
And what will those events look like when we come back, right? Are they going to exist? Are they going to go away? Will people feel safe? Do we have a long period of time where we just have them remotely until we all have the vaccine? Like, what does that? I mean, it's a rhetorical question. I don't really expect an answer,
Yeah.
but it is.
It's interesting. A week ago, I would have said to you, okay, when this is all done, it's going to be like wildfire. We're going to be creating stuff for people left and right. But you know what? The longer that this goes on and the longer that they talk about, the life cycle of the disease and based on the climate factors, that those answers may not stand up for much longer. So now we have to create new solutions based on that.
And it's interesting that you say that because I know last week when I was talking, I would say things like, "Yeah, I kind of feel like May is going to be like the last week before Christmas, and everybody's going to be trying to jam to get their work done because they've been waiting for so long. So take this time to prepare, get your bids in place, get ready to go, get your crew lined up." And I don't know if that's true anymore. I think clients and brands are really rethinking what is their messaging, what is their business, what is their business might completely change.
I agree, and I think the week before Christmas is a good analogy. That's definitely the way that I was thinking about it. But yeah, you're right. A week ago I would have agreed with you. I would have said, make sure you got everybody lined up, know what their schedules are, what days do they have on hold for future projects. But I can't say that any longer. I don't know that that's, for as much as we were kind of, lamenting about the folks that didn't take it seriously, there are plenty of folks that take it really seriously, a lot of our clients included. So will they be so willing to go on a big soundstage with 100 people? I don't
Right.
know.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know yet.
Well, and think about what you're advertising, right, to the pharma community. A lot of it is patients who have compromised health. And
Right.
if you're
I
not
mean,
using real patients, you're using older people probably. So what does that look like?
it's interesting. It's interesting that you bring up that particular part of our business too, right? Because I've been doing this a long time, and I can't tell you how many times that we have danced with trying to present solutions so that people could create their own content remotely. It never goes well. It never goes well unless you're Pepsi and you have a billion people sending in content that you can choose from, right? But it's interesting now that things have changed, and based on the events of the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden that's a really hot topic again. So it's fascinating what has come to the forefront based on, necessity being the mother of invention.
Yeah, right now we're trying to figure out how to do what we've always done in the new parameters. I
Yeah.
think what's going to happen is the parameters are going to change. The needs are going to change. The messaging is going to change. The client's point of view on their business is going to change because they're going to be thinking about what their customers want and how their customers feel safe or whatever is relevant for their actual industry. And that's going to change the creative. That's going to change everything.
Yeah, it already has.
It already has. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the future of what we think our productions could look like. I had a conversation with another rep today, and she kept saying, this is not a COVID fire sale. Like, we are not going to be able to do things for less. In fact, it's probably going to cost more.
Wait,
And
what do you mean by that?
meaning, she's getting phone calls for people who are saying, well, our budgets are going to get slashed, so I need you to cut less, or I have if your photographer is going to do this shoot in isolation for me because he's a product photographer, it's going to be less, right? Because I don't have all these people on set with me. And she's just like, okay, he's the stylist, the producer, the photographer. Like, I'm not going to give it to you. You're not going to get it for a deal.
That's very insulting, actually.
Right?
It really is.
Yeah.
It,
And I think too, I think there's so much that goes along with this. I think also the idea that when we do come back, and this isn't talking about the safety of a set, but this is talking about all the hard work that photographers, our industry, the producers, the art producers like yourself and your team have put together in terms of structuring usage and fees and extra usage and libraries and all of that. And if we all of a sudden come in because we're afraid that we haven't worked in a while and we want to get the job and we're slashing and burning everything, we're never going to get back. We're never going to get that back. We'll be setting precedences that will, as I keep saying, will be a race to the bottom for all of us.
yeah, and I'll just be shooting myself in the foot too, because if my clients think that they can get more content or the same amount of content for a lesser price, that's not going to happen. If they're going to want to let it spend less money, they're going to have to, their scopes are going to have to be smaller.
Well, and don't you see a scenario where they actually are going to have to spend more money because I'm not sure we can create as much as quickly as we used to be able to.
I think about just let's just say, I don't know, let's pick new hair and makeup protocols, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't have good clean makeup, you can have problems with that just to begin with, right? But now you have cost for gloves, and maybe the place has to be sanitized. Yeah, I think that I don't see it being cheaper to do the same amount of work, especially if there's going to be all these added things that have to be accounted for.
Well, and how about the idea that, if it's not safe enough for a client to be on set, is it safe enough for a crew to be on
Yeah,
set?
I love
Right.
that. I love the folks that have been calling me this week and saying, "Well, you could just go into the studio and set up a remote camera, and then we'll do the casting remote." But yeah, that's great. But what happens to that? What happens at that moment when you have to have? Maybe you could do it with 3 people. It's still three
Right.
people together in a closed room that shouldn't be together at a time like this.
The other part of what goes along with that, who's getting shoot insurance right now? I don't think anybody, right? And what does the future of insurance look like? And the
Yeah,
liability involved. And how about the
I'd be
contract?
very. That's a good point. Like, I wonder, production companies or photographers that were scheduled to shoot during this time that got canceled, is it act of God in the in on that page in the contract?
It's not. It is not. So
Interesting.
what's happening? Yeah. And
It
what are
should
those
be.
contracts? Yeah, but I can't really speak to it specifically, but I know for sure that it's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know the legal reasons they're given, but yeah, it's harsh. But I think we all need to now look at our terms and our conditions and our POs and what we're being asked to sign. Indemnification, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
No, agreed.
I no longer want to give you an entire library for unlimited use, unlimited time. I'm not saying that I won't. I'm just saying, wow, okay, now I've given up any future income streams that I would have had if I had sold the usage for 3 years or 2 years or 5 years.
Right.
Um, and I think less than that, though, is the idea of liability and who's willing to take responsibility for who's on your set and who you're asking to work. So yeah,
Yeah.
we might be able to live stream a shoot, which we've all done before.
Yep.
Um,
It
so,
never
but
goes well.
well,
There's
and
always
will the expectations be okay such that they will, not have the same high expectations as before? What if the video feed doesn't work? What if,
right.
a conversation with a location photographer today, he's like, I'm all over doing a live stream or whatever they need and remote capture. He's like, but you need really good Wi Fi for that.
Yeah. And then like you said earlier, oh, well, there you go. Now you have another expense that wasn't there before because you've added this parameter that I have to fulfill.
So, I mean, again, I'm not want to talk ourselves out of a job.
No, no.
But I think maybe we should all be using this time to really get together and talk about, like, what do our contracts look like? What are we going to feel okay about doing on set? What are we going to need to require is on, like when studio teachers, became required to be on set when then there were children on set. Does there need to be a safety person on set? And does that person have liability associated with them? How do we get insurance? Like all of it, I think is and I know, and I do know personally that there are those conversations happening with, experts in production and in our field, kind of gathering right now to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, Allison and I were just talking about the liability the other day. It adds another dimension to it. In our case, we're going to be hosting people at our place. What does that look like moving forward? It's interesting, and I don't know what the answer is yet. You know.
No, I agree with you. I don't either. I do feel comfort in the fact that having done these podcasts for so long and been in the industry for so long, so many of us, we're just like, it's an amazing group of people who are very resourceful and have their whole lives and their careers are around finding a solution. And they're very community focused, and everyone is very positive in what they're sharing and how transparent they're being. And so I'm not hopeful like I wasn't hopeful, but I think the hope is a good word to use because everyone's in this together and really trying to make it a better, like, let's take a broken system and figure out how we can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've always enjoyed about being in this community, but I've seen a lot of it over the last couple of weeks, and it's like, you kind of take it for granted when things are just kind of chugging along, but then when you realize when there's a really serious situation like this, it just shows even more how much they have each other's backs and the sharing of information. I mean, that's one thing that has always kept me in the community, and just knowing that you could ask anybody for help or advice, and it is really nice to see that going on. It's really nice to see photographers selling prints to take care of their crews now, and people pulling together in those ways as well. It's
Yeah.
it's it's been really nice.
Well, I think and I was on a webinar this morning and we were all talking about what everyone's doing to manage all of it. And I just said, like, we should all pat ourselves on the back for a second because it really has only been a couple of weeks. And we have really mobilized and pivoted our businesses and have been there for each other as a community and have been very transparent about what we're up to and trying to help each other. And it's a relatively short amount of time. I mean, if we're at this for another month or so, imagine what will develop over that time.
Yeah, I'm really, even over the next 2 weeks, I'm curious, like, because people just keep coming up with cool stuff all the time. So it's been fun to be part of. It's been fun to watch in that respect.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about marketing. And do you think it's okay right now? Because I get this question from photographers all the time to market right now. What sort of messages are appropriate? What isn't appropriate? How do you feel about it?
I feel like it's a very double-edged sword right now, right? When the whole thing started going down, you started to get emails from everybody, including your utility providers, folks that you haven't heard of in a million years, some company that you signed up for and you never followed. So I thought that they were very pandering. I thought that they were taking advantage of the situation. I have found that most of the stuff from the photo community, 99% of it, directors, video, photography, it's been about solutions. It's like, look, these are hard times, but if you need something, I'm out in the woods with my family, or I have this library of images for you to use, or I have stock footage. Because in those communications and in that marketing moment, they're providing me with solutions. What I don't appreciate are the folks jamming up my inbox with, "Hey, I hope you're okay. Just wanted to say hello." I really, really, I mean, really? you just want to say hello. I mean, unless we're personal friends, I've already spoken to you. So I think that the stuff that I got that wasn't solution oriented was just another bunch of spam. Unfortunately, based under the circumstances, I think it makes them look like I don't think it makes them look good. Like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I haven't written to you in a really long time, but there's a disaster going on now, so I'm gonna write to my whole contact list."
Yeah.
I've also gotten a lot of form letters, which just which validates my harsh opinions to myself, you know?
Yeah. When, the first day we went into shelter in place, I think, I don't know. I don't, again, I can't remember. I can't keep track of the time.
They're all blurring together.
I spent an entire weekend working on a plan for my photographers in terms of what I thought we should and should not be doing. And the first thing on the list, this was very early on, was if you have friends in the business, reach out to them and make sure they're okay and just say hi. And we did that early on. And those were reaching out to you and Allison and the people we know well.
Mhm.
And I just said to Lorianne the other day, I'm like, okay, now we're done with that. Like anybody left on the list that we haven't already talked to or connected with, it's going to seem like spam because everyone else, even though I would like to check in with them, I like the people who are at the top of my list were at the top of my list, and they got a text from me or a call from me like I would a friend or an email from me. So
Yeah,
I think your advice is really great. Like, don't use the check-in as a means to market. If you're truly concerned about someone, it's because they're your friend. And if you wouldn't go out for a drink with them or, go out to lunch with them or share some family news with them, they're not someone to just check in with.
yeah, yeah, I agree, and you have to, unfortunately for the folks that chose to communicate in that fashion, I mean, you gotta understand they were sandwiched between emails from Citibank, who could give a shit what happens to me, and, like, Taco Bell from when my son was 13 and never closed the account, So
No, that's really great advice. And again, it goes to it's changing daily, right? What was appropriate last week might not be appropriate this week.
good manners and smart communications doesn't change just, that those are foundational things that should be anyway. Like for instance, I'm very adamant about, people sending me their new work and I ask for it all the time. And I will look at the work. That's what I do. That's why I ask for it. But it's the same thing during the year. If there wasn't a pandemic and somebody just writes to me and say hello, and I'm like, well, where's your work been for the last 6 months?
Right.
It's in many ways it's along those lines as well.
What about any housekeeping items that you think photographers, directors should be working on during this time? You are on the front lines of seeing their websites and the work that they send to you. Is there anything you'd like to have them be like, oh my God, please just fix this about how you communicate or whatever?
No, I mean nothing that I can think of offhand. I mean, I would say the same thing about electronic communications that I tell people that pay to make postcards. Like, just make sure you know who you're sending it to. Make sure it's the right audience. And I say that about print pieces because the CFO in my company always comes by and drops off like a giant stack of postcards that he gets for no reason. And I think it's the same thing with photographers and directors. Like, it's just common sense. Like, show people what they need to see. Show people what's going to interest them. Like people repeatedly send me beautiful images of food in the studio, but if they had done a 15 minutes worth of research, they would know that they're wasting their time. I think I would say to anybody, the interns that I work with or a photographer, like know who your audience is because you have to have a custom delivery to them. If you're going to send to all lifestyle art buyers and producers, that's perfect. But, why would you send your food to them? It's stuff little things like that, I think.
Well,
I
maybe it's
think
a good time for studios to work on, cultivating their lists and cleaning it up
yeah.
um,
Well,
whenever.
I think I go back to thinking about how you and your team responded in the beginning, right? So, just like you said, we are hardwired. There is a challenge, and we are going to present a solution or multiple solutions or whatever it takes. But the fact that you got all that content available to be stocked so fast, to be quite honest, it's probably something that everybody should be doing anyway, right? And now you just had the reason to push you forward to do it, and now it's done. So I feel like folks like yourself who are doing things like that, that you're more super prepared for the future than anybody else because these offerings are going to be important as we move forward, I think.
No, it's true. I would have loved to have done the stock thing forever ago, but never mind getting all my artists to jam on getting me what I needed to do that quickly. So it was really nice to be able to have everybody do that all at once. I think the other difference is I think people in the stock world right now are a little bit more open to purchasing images that may not be model released either and be willing to pay. Well, they have releases, but they might have to pay a fee
Yeah.
for. So that made the organization of it a little bit easier as well. But you're right, it is something I need to have for the future. It's not something I need for the next 2 months. This is something that's going to stick with us for a long time.
Right. Because I mean, I'm just going to talk about my business. We work with all doctors and medical folks, and I'm not so sure that they're going to want to be traveling for a while so there have to be solutions created around that. And I think
Hmm.
that having those choices are going to become important.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think so. What about working remotely for you, Michael? Do you have any suggestions for tools, online tools that work really well for you?
I think that Zoom is invaluable. I think it's a fantastic tool. I mean, I don't know how anybody else does it, but I require that everyone turn their video on, or else I don't think that it's a
You said that in the last one, and I love that.
yeah, I won't start the meeting until everybody's on. So
Oh,
it's important. If we're gonna work like this, I think it's a really important communication tool. And the head of my project management department will probably jump up and down in joy when he hears this podcast because I've also adopted using this tool called Slack.
oh yeah, yeah,
Um, I resisted for quite some time because I didn't think that I needed another communication stream. And it's actually worked out pretty well. It's actually been a fairly powerful tool. For folks that don't have big budgets and, they need to get scrappy right now, Vimeo is a great way to review video. You can create links and, folks can mark up your content. To be quite honest, there are no new tools that we're using or anything new that we're trying out. It's just really hitting hard the tools that let us work remotely, like the Zoom and the Slack. Everything
yeah.
else has been pretty much the same.
We've been using it for a while, and I'm so glad I had it in place already. But we use something called Quip, which
Mhm,
is it's like a glorified Google Docs, Google Sheets, everything. You tag people, we can all see everything at the same time. I like the organization better than the Google
mhm.
platform. But if I didn't have that, I think I'd be overwhelmed right now with the amount of emails going back between my team, back and forth. And you'd like, wait, where was that email? Where's the last thing? And then we're all editing the same document. We're all editing the same sheets. We're keeping our spreadsheets up to date. And that's been really helpful for us.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, for us, we have a server-based workflow, so, eventually everything finds its way there.
Yeah.
I know my editors have been working probably for the last 6 months with a system called Box,
Oh, yeah.
probably for about a year, and that seems to they seem to have a little better luck with that than, like, the restrictions of having Dropbox or something along those lines where there's, size limitations. No, I gotta be honest with you, and I don't mean to say this flippantly or again to play it down, but this is with the exception of not having access to the studio or the inability to, produce a shoot, everything post-wise is moving to the same remote workflow that it was prior to this.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I'm sure your clients value that. Well, before we go, and you are 3 hours ahead of me, so your weekend is going to happen before my weekend is going to
Yeah, I'm
happen.
gonna go from this room to the next one.
Yeah. I think we might be having a margarita night tonight. I'm not sure. We'll see.
Good for
I wondered just from a mental health point of view, like checking in, like how do you think people in your, immediate team? Like, how are people doing? Are they, what's the general sense of when their anxiety starts and when they are calm, and how are they handling it? And what does their support network look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question because it's so different for everybody, right? Like, to be quite honest, I've one of the challenges of managing folks in this case that's different from just managing folks off site, right? That's not a big deal. But some of the folks are home alone and they've been home alone for, in some cases a little over 2 weeks now. So that's been a new component to have to deal with. Making sure that they're engaged, making sure that they're okay. Interestingly enough, now that we are all remotely, I know this is going to sound silly, but we really do talk more than we do in the office.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true.
in many cases, it's because I can't just stand up and walk over to their desks. We're kind of forced to communicate this way, and the conversations end up being longer, but the meetings end up being shorter and much more effective.
Yeah,
But yeah, the mental health thing has been, my company has been good about that and trying to create events for people. They just had the whole company on for a Zoom meeting. So little things like that. But yeah, it's been an interesting dynamic. It's been the most interesting part for me is that I have an intern right now, and that's been fascinating to try to accomplish that or work that the way that I usually do, not being on site.
that's
So
very dedicated of you.
in some ways it's kind of not fair for her, but we're definitely trying to make the best of it. I think that's really, what that comes, I mean, I hate to be so simple, but it's like we just have to try to make the best of every day. And every day is a different challenge or a different, somebody's looking forward to a campaign or something that we're going to have to do. So the parameters change constantly.
Yeah, I agree. I think from a mental health point of view, from the people that I'm talking to, I feel like the first week or so, it was this reactive, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? What do I need to do? What's my to do list? I now hear people kind of settling into a bit of a routine and a little bit calmer with how, like, what their day to day looks like. I do still hear the anxiety about the future and finances, things that none of us have answers to. But I think people are finding comfort in that there are some really great conversations happening in our industry about how to make it safe, how to get income streams going again.
Yeah,
So
I
I,
mean, think about that. Like, how many other industries would everyone band together and figure out how each other could make money? Not many.
right.
That's why I love being in this part of the universe.
No, I agree. So I think we are in a very interesting and unique, unprecedented historical time. It's just crazy. But I can only be thankful for the relationships and the community that I'm in, and your friendship, Michael, has been very special over the years. And being able to call you and ask you to do this podcast and having you say yes for a second time. So thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, believe me, it goes both ways. I mean, I appreciate that, the insights that I can give to the community. Hopefully, if it even just helps one person, then that's amazing. But quite honestly, for me, in speaking to you, I get to learn a lot from the other side. I get to learn about what's going on. How can I support these artists? What are the types of solutions are they creating? So, I mean, you're my lifeline to that as well. So, thank you.
Well, I hope you are surrounded by everyone and everything you need right now, Michael. And I
Except for
really
the
like
margaritas that you're going to make, everything's good.
last Friday night was family beer pong. I think tonight is family margaritas. We'll see. We didn't bother that crazy tiger movie on Netflix that we're watching.
Oh, I
Uh,
haven't seen that yet. I gotta get to that.
Another podcast for sure. Once you
All right, Heather. Thanks for having me. Have a great weekend.